Good afternoon, everybody. We are so glad that you're joining us for this exciting webinar about a topic that I know both Liz and I and Trish, all three of us, care a lot about, and it looks like you all do too, about sustainable revenue models for AT reuse. We're looking forward to spending some time with you today to talk about this. I'm going to turn this over to Liz, and she's going to go over some of the details, and then we'll go back and forth.
Thank you, Carolyn. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us for, as Carolyn said, what we believe is a very important topic on sustaining all of our AT reuse programs across the country. Before we jump into the bulk of today's conversation, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping tips on today's webinar. I had just recently typed in welcome everyone in the chat window. It's over to the right-hand side of the PowerPoint display there. Please know that you can communicate with us throughout today's webinar. Carolyn, Trish, and myself will be keeping an eye on the chat window. Put your comments, put your questions, your notes to us there as well too, and we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. We'll be reading that out loud, and that way we can address any issues, any questions that y'all have. Over to the far right side of your screen, what you see there is the list of your hosts and all the participants joining you all on today's webinar. So y'all will be able to see, we've got Amy and Marty on from AT3, and Rob is joining us with ACL, and so many great folks that we've got from all across the country. So thank you all so much for being on, but that way y'all can interact with each other, send direct messages if you'd like as well too. So know that you can do that. Hopefully y'all can see the PowerPoint slide, the title slide. We'll be moving that presentation as we're presenting. So there you go right there. So that's where the main content of today's topic will be. So just know that that's where all the information is coming through. Right above the PowerPoint slide, over to the top right, there's all sorts of buttons that y'all can click. You can go into the meeting file to adjust your Zoom settings, make it full screen, just whatever you need to do to make it comfortable as well too, to adjust any way that you've got to view it. We want to let you all know that we are recording this webinar. Once it's over, we'll get it cleaned up and we'll post it up on our archives. It'll definitely be on the AT3 website as well. So definitely check back there and check out the webinar just whenever you need it. So again, we're so excited to have y'all on today. We're going to be focused on sustainability models for AT reuse programs. So the whole question that we're asking everybody is, what underpins the financial stability of your reuse program? It's absolutely a time for an update on what works, whether it's old or new. We're so lucky to be in this amazing community of folks that are thriving and want everyone to benefit from the great work that we're all doing. And so I've been impressed over the years at how many times we've reached out to folks, and y'all have been so willing to share your sustainability models, your business plans, all of that. And it's been a really awesome network of folks. So today's webinar is going to address three objectives. The first one is to learn about successful new and traditional sustainability strategies. The second one is we're going to examine key staffing to promote sustainability. And then third, we're going to explore how programs use outcomes data to promote their sustainability. We want to say thank you to a bunch of folks out there. Thank you so much to the survey respondents for providing input about your sustainability models and strategies. We'll be diving in deeper into the survey that we put out with AT3 and what that looks like. And so we'll be sharing the results and just information that we've collected. Thank you to all of the ATAC programs for your information, your partners, all the information you put out on your websites, sharing your strategies. We pull from that information all the time. So thank you for just being an awesome community and for the awesome work that you're doing. Obviously, to the nonprofit organizations from other arenas, y'all have such great models and awesome ideas that we can emulate and adopt, and again, just really share. So we really appreciate that. And then just a special thank you and shout out to Sarah Sack in Kansas and Sonia Scheibel in Virginia for their longstanding work on outcomes measurements. So back in some of the early days, they were just some of our folks that were hop into it, really working with us on collecting data and looking at those outcome measurements. And so we still absolutely rely on that information. We'll be sharing some of that with you today. So everybody knows I'm Carolyn.
You are.
I am not Carolyn. I am Liz Prasad, and the wonderful, amazing Carolyn Phillips is sitting right beside me. And special shout out and thank you to Trish Redmond. Trish has been a longstanding member of the team with Pass It On Center and has really helped pull some of this content together. And so we're excited that Trish is on today to be speaking with all of you just about the content of today's topic as well. So.
And yes, thank you so much, Trish, and obviously really appreciate you, Liz, and all the great work y'all are doing. But also, thank you again to AT3 for partnering with us and allowing us this opportunity. We absolutely love this topic, all things assistive technology, but especially reuse, and it's because of the power of these programs when it comes to reuse. And so we do appreciate that opportunity. So thank you to AT3 for allowing us to partner. So we're going to talk about several things. And I think when we start talking about this topic in particular, it reminds me of my early career days when I was just starting out in the assistive technology field and in the community, and started working on reuse. And that was an area that I knew we had a big need here in Georgia, and it absolutely was one of those foundational moments for me and transformational moments for me when I got the opportunity to help create several reuse programs and then also help grow so many reuse programs. They absolutely changed lives, no doubt. And my dad, I remember in those early days back in the 90s, and I would go home and I'm talking to my dad about, oh gosh, we're starting this reuse program. And his background was aerospace engineering, and so he often was giving me this advice, and he would say, it's not what you start, it's what you finish. And so it's important that you actually build something that's sustainable, that's going to outlive you, or that could outlive, and be sustainable on its own. And that's the sign of a good program, something that's not dependent upon the people that actually founded it or created it. And I'm happy to say that a lot of the things that we've created, we have been able to successfully spin out, and they do continue. And so I know a lot of the folks that are within our AT community are new, which is great. And then, of course, we have a lot of folks that we've worked with for, well over 2 decades. And so we have a good mix of people that we could learn from. So don't be afraid to ask questions. This is not a conversation that we'll have an hour and then boom, you've got it. This is the beginning of a dialogue, if you will, for some of you, and just know that we can continue this conversation. So no doubt. We did indeed do the sustainability survey. It was 10 questions, and we appreciate everybody who participated, 27 respondents. And what we did is we were looking at the community of practice and, got the word out there. And what we were looking at specifically are support strategies. What was the biggest, or what's the, the most prevalent source of income for the reuse program? What are, how are you paying for services? What are some fundraising and programs or events that you put together? What are some of those creative things that are out there, but also what are some tips around some of that? What are some of the structured models for contribution? And there are several programs that actually have some well-developed models that we want to look at and emulate. And then also, how are folks using outcomes data, but also outputs data to promote sustainability? And so we're going to dive into some of this as we go forward. So when we're really looking at the core of sustainability, and we're looking at what makes a program thrive, what keeps it going and growing, what we find is that programs that are designed to engage their stakeholders, and that's the whole range of stakeholders. So it's not just one set, but it's the folks you're working with, it's the people who are donating to you, either in kind or in talent or in product or in other ways. And also your partners, and that's the whole range of partners. And then also diversifying, and we talk about this a lot, diversifying your sources of income. I was talking about that earlier this morning with folks, is the importance of diversification for your funding sources. And so really looking at a fine-tune way and fine-tuning your way of donations when it comes to your strategy. Really looking at what's working in other models, and a lot of times what we can find are models that work well across settings, that, you know, we'll find that there's some likeness, perhaps where you wouldn't find it. It may be that you're reusing a different type of technology, but it may be very similar to another area in a rural community. Who knows? When it comes to your model. And then also understanding and evaluating that cost-benefit return on investment, and understanding what indeed is your return on investment, having that information in your back pocket, and being able to quickly tell the story of that's how all of that works. So, you know, just paying attention to all of it and making sure that folks are aware of that this is indeed something you need to have at the ready. There are folks that I've worked with, and I'll say, hey, what's your return on investment for your program? And the folks that can turn to me and say, you know what, for every dollar you give me, the community gets, you know, $3 back, or gets 50 cents back, or gets $12 back, which we see with some of our reuse programs, but also understanding how you come up with that formula. And then building the capacity to serve, right? So those are the strategies that really come to, when we talk about sustainability, kind of where things are. So using those outputs and outcomes, really targeting, you know, excellence and leveraging partnerships, figuring out what it is that somebody else needs, what it is that you have, and having those meaningful conversations that are really strategic and can move your program to a whole other level. So Trish is always bringing quotes, and I love this. Liz does the same thing, and I think this is a perfect quote for what we're talking about here, and just a kind of an idea of why people, what it is that gets people hooked and why they get involved. And so often it is a cause. It's recruiting for the cause, if you will, and making sure that we're thinking kind of bigger about why people get involved with our programs. Why does it matter? So Randy Hawthorne said this: our goal as nonprofits is to find people that appreciate our organization's mission. Then we entice them to join by providing opportunities to engage. This is old advice, but it's also new advice. I find that this is absolutely incredibly helpful. And a lot of times people do want that meaningful way to engage. So the way that, we have found, and this is over time, some of it's hands-on experience, some of it's listening to some of you who are with us, and then some of it's just, watching and observing. But really, what you want to be able to do is get active participants. You want folks to really kind of join your cause and become interested. And sometimes that is if you can present them with a customized opportunity. I often have those in my back pocket where I know that, I'm going to be looking for, specific help in a specific way. For example, there was a news broadcaster who's pretty well known in the Atlanta area, and he showed up and he donated all this equipment to us. And he was grieving. He was going through a grieving process. That's part of why he was donating, because somebody had passed. And he said, let me know if there's anything I can do. And I said, what you could do is, could you do a little video for us? Could you do a little story? And sure enough, he lended his talent for years in getting the word out and really helping us. And that was awesome. And then it's also things like we had a surgeon who donated a computer to us one time, and she said, here's the thing I love about working on these computers. I wish that I could learn how to really do computer repair, because my patients don't die. We just recycle them. And I was like, that's nice. And so sure enough, she's been volunteering with the program since 1996. which is great. And so it's having those opportunities in your back pocket and ready. Showing the results of what you've done with their money, time, and or support. Being able to go back and say, here's what happened. So for example, with the broadcast person, we were able to go back and say, hey, we reached this number of folks, and we got donations in these areas that we hadn't reached before. With the surgeon, we were able to say, oh my gosh, you were able to actually get computers at no cost, low cost to X number of people. And it was very cool to, have those folks really get involved and committed. Thanking them. Can I tell you, I don't think that people say thank you enough. Now, that may be my Southern ways. Who knows? But I find that a simple thank you goes so far. People truly appreciate it, obviously when we're sincere. Mr. Rogers had a very good quote, and he was talking basically about the importance of appreciation, and I continue to learn from him. But so he said appreciation is really it's a sacred thing when we look at what's best in a person, and that we actually stop in that moment and say thank you. That it's important to do that, and I agree. I think that's very important. So also keeping folks informed by their favorite communication method. I think that sometimes I get frustrated because there's a group that my family's been donating to for years. They keep calling us on a home phone. I have lost the home phone. I have no idea where it is. It shows up on our TV that they're calling, and I'm like, oh well. Now, I'm saying that as I'm sitting here, and they could have emailed me, texted me, messaged me, any number of other ways to get me. So thinking about all of that. And then also, repeating all of these things. So when we're talking about diversifying the sources of income, what you really need to think about, and I think a lot of times people get weighed down by the enormity of all of it. My dad also used to say, how do you eat an elephant? This is back in the early days of starting out my career with reuse. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Now, honestly, I don't know why we're eating elephants, but the thing is that I think that a lot of times people skip to, oh my gosh, how am I going to fund this for the next 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, and they get overwhelmed. And really, it's just a matter of sharing your vision, coming up with a plan, figuring out, how can you really build that base to be really strong and stable for operations, and then fine-tuning with some of those successful strategies. One of the things that Trish has taught me, and part of it has to do with experience that we've had when we are working with people who receive grants, is incremental growth is the way to go, not growth all at one time. I'm actually very aware of that even more right now in my career than ever before, that the importance of strategic incremental growth. And that's what I encourage, and that's what we all should think about when it comes to reuse. Tracking the return on investment, for those new strategies. What's working, what's not working? Did that radio announcement work? Does this placement of this ad work? If I pay $30 and I actually get the word out to 30,000 people on Facebook, does that work? And really thinking about that. And then once again, capitalizing on your partnerships, in-kind contributions. Don't underestimate how important those are. They're incredibly important. And then really a smart use of volunteers to avoid expenses. I think that once again, sometimes we don't get as creative as we really could. And so just thinking about that. So when we're talking about some of the reported sources of income from the survey results, I found this very helpful. And Liz, do you want to go over this part?
Sure, I would be happy to. So according to the survey, this is what, and we've got these in order of the greatest amounts of the way that folks are getting sources of program income. So up here it shows that grants is the largest at 50, well, it matches with the next one down. Grants at 55.6%. The use of volunteers to minimize expenses was actually equivalent to grants. So that's coming in right at 55% as well too. Marketing and development strategies, 48%. Partnerships that provide in-kind services, so maybe relying on your network, that's at 44%. Fees for AT products at 33%, fees for AT services at 25, 26%, special fundraising events, that was 25% of survey respondents, contracts, so those folks that have contracts for services, that comes in at 22%, partnerships that actually generate funds, 18%, and then thrift stores that support the reuse program through sales, that's at 11%. So again, just very helpful information, and I really appreciate being able to see just a lot of the creative ways that folks are bringing in income into the programs.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, that is very helpful. It's interesting, too, when we're talking about the top sources, and this was ranked in order of tabulation when it comes to income and in-kind contributions. So the number one, it's grants, and that does include Health and Human Services. I would imagine part of that has to do with AT funding, and then other sources, too. Some of the Medicaid programs that are out there, what have you. Also state funding. I know that a lot of programs do get varying ranges of state funding, and that is indeed helpful. Number two, contributions from individual donors. Very, very important. And then number three, fees for AT products. And then number four, in-kind contributions from partnerships. Now, honestly, number three, it does concern me some. And that has to do with some of the liability issues that are out there and some of the policies and procedures and all of that, and understanding, what's that fine line of when do we sell and when do we not sell equipment. And so just thinking about all of it. So, just paying attention to all of that. And then really looking at considerations when you're thinking about grants. And this goes back to some of the things that I was talking about just a few moments ago that, Trish and Liz and I have been concerned about, which is, bigger money, but what's out there? What are all those questions that you need to think about? I think sometimes people do go for that one big time grant award, and they think, that's going to be the solution to our problems. But thinking really about, is there an ongoing renewal possibility? If it's not renewable, then maybe focus on just some special projects, something specific, and some kind of improvement that doesn't require ongoing financial investment. There is a program that we've worked with that was awesome, and then they got a huge grant, and then they went away. And it's because they couldn't sustain it, so they grew too quickly. So really, the other thing, and I think this can happen, whenever we start out our meetings often, we often focus on our mission, and we talk about making sure that the rest of our conversation in the meeting is going to be focused on mission, that we're not going to do mission creep and all of that. Sometimes when you're looking at grants, they end up taking you away from your mission if you're not careful. So just once again, being mindful of that and figuring out what is that net value of the grant, and then, is there overhead cost? Are there administrative costs that you need to be mindful of? What is the value of time required to develop the application? I have found that some folks actually spent so much time writing and reporting and all of that for the grant that they lost sight of the actual work. And so, paying attention to that. Also considering the opportunity cost of the one time, that's invested in some of the grant applications. So what else could you do with that time? And then we would also encourage you to focus on foundations or corporations that are like-minded, that have some type of interest, that there's a hook there somehow, where you can build that long-term partnership. And some of you actually on this webinar have done that very successfully. And so, paying attention to nurturing those relationships, making them grow, and investing for the long term.
So when it comes to devising successful fundraising strategies, there are so many awesome things happening out there. I'm a party planner at heart, so I love this. There are so many ways that y'all can get creative, and even just see what some of the partnering programs across the country have already done and expand on that. So looking at a donation campaign? Is there an event that you could maybe charge people to participate in, or maybe just a small little cover charge, a social gathering, or have some sort of entertainment with a fee? I think you could even share success stories about folks that you've that have really benefited from your program. We've done that at some bigger conferences where we've printed posters of pictures of individuals, obviously with their permission, and we share quotes and stories and really just make it a high impact, visible campaign that would really help to spread word about the awesome work that your program is doing. You could have a pledge program with monthly commitments or a multi-year pledge program. The photos up here are just examples of what some programs were doing. So up at the top right is a picture of an event that Project Mend from San Antonio, Texas pulled together. This is the toast of the town. And so there's just a bunch of folks that are gathered, just hanging out for this event. And at the bottom left is John Jam. This is a concert. It was also a chili contest to benefit the Real Project, which is a reuse partner in Alabama. And I believe I see Helen Baker, hello Helen, from Alabama on here as well too. So just two events that were really bigger, that were community events that really brought in a great amount of the community and really helped to raise funds for the program as well too.
Right on. Also those individual donation strategies, and we've, at first I wasn't sure about whether these would work or not, and sure enough, they have worked. And I think that you can't put all of your emphasis on this, but you sure can have it as a piece of your diversification pie. There's a lot out there that we know well. Even when I say ASPCA, which I don't even know what that stands for, but what I know is that it's the Sarah McLachlan song that makes me teary. And so I'm like, oh, those animals, it's awful. St. Jude's, children, absolutely. Shriners, right? National Public Radio, I can still hear their campaigns in my head. And so, when you're thinking about that, and you're also thinking about all those folks that are out there, boots on the streets, if you will, or ringing bells, those types of things. That individual donation strategy really is a part of the puzzle. It's a part of the pie. So there are some things to learn from that success. If you can really, even within your own local community or within your county, within your state, strive to become that household word that, that go-to, a recognizable brand. And several of you, once again, on a national level have absolutely done that. And your partners have done that. And make it very easy to contribute. If people have to click, I think it's 3 times, then you've lost them. So 1 click, 2 click, or even just 1 click would be good. I know a lot of folks are starting to use donations through Facebook, and having that so you click once and boom, and you're finished, and yay. It's really, really nice. And then also creating an affiliate group for your cause that has kind of a structured contribution or way to help you with your pledges. One way right here in Georgia is if you get hooked into the state contribution campaign, then state employees can actually say, yep, I'm going to give to this, this year, and I'm going to pay a little bit out of my paycheck every month. I actually do that for all the reuse programs in Georgia, and that's what I contribute to, the ones that are registered. And I also do ASPCA. So thinking about all of that.
Clearly their campaign worked on you.
It did work. It did. So, charity does begin at the homepage, and I thought that was so clever. Trish came up with that. And so do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So here we're using Project Mend from San Antonio as an example. I am giggling at Charity Begins at the homepage, Trish. I love that. But really it's all about checking your donation strategy. So you can see this is a screenshot of the Project Mend donation page. And at the very top, there are different links for various parts on their website. And donate is highlighted right in the middle. So it's very clear on how to get there. And there's no hunting for it. So you want to just think about your strategy. Is your donate tab on your homepage or a link to a reuse partners page? Is there a concise explanation of who benefits from your donations and how? Again, it's so important to share where that individual or that partnering program's money is going when they give donations. Do you offer simple, easy options for contributing in a secure way? If you notice on the donation page on Project Men's website, what I absolutely love about this is they have fixed amounts ready to go. Of course, there's an area where you can put in your own amount that you would like, but everything is just easy to click, 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 submit, and then your donation is there. I'm often finding that when donations are popping up on websites like this where it's a fixed menu option or even on an app, for me, I'm apt to donate more because it's just ready to go. It's kind of a no-brainer. Yes, I can contribute $25, $50, $100 because it's right there. So I do like how easy that is. So again, just easy options for securing those contributions. And then we also mentioned the automated donations. You can even do that at scheduled intervals. So again, just making the process very easy for folks that are looking at your website. And then I see that, this is a great suggestion from Trish. She wrote in the chat area, another option is to encourage supporters to designate your project when they shop on Amazon Smile. So it's very easy to get your program set up through Amazon Smile, and then when people go to Amazon.com to shop, they simply just shop typically how they would normally. They click on your program, and everything that they do will benefit your program while they're shopping through Amazon. So it's super easy to get that set up, and that's definitely another great strategy. Thanks for that tip, Trish.
Absolutely. Yes, we really do appreciate that. So also, tapping into the reasons why people give. A lot of people can get connected to our reuse programs very, very easily. And it's just a matter of helping them understand. People do act from the heart. That's why I contribute. That's often, a lot of times that's part of why we do the work we do. It's not necessarily from the head. And so thinking about how you can be a good steward and showing them that you are a good steward of their money, that maybe you're even leveraging those dollars in a creative way. Explain where the money's going, but it really has to be more than numbers, pie charts, things like that. It is that story, and it is that outcome that actually makes a big difference. Giving is also a personal act. It is important that your appeal, that it's donor-centric, that you are telling that donor why they need to care and why it matters. Once again, not a hard sell. I've heard some of you in action and very talented at being able to get to that. But it's good to remember that it is a personal act. And then also, the act of giving is immediate. So give that opportunity for immediate, like act here and now. And then really building that relationship. But if you can get them that moment, then it really can make a big difference. So thinking about those. Emulating some of the experts, there are ASPCA, which again, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but I do see a little kitten up there. Yes. And so, these do work. And so making sure that, even if you're diving a little deeper and what are those frequently asked questions about donations, there's some good answers on some of those websites. I know when I do contributions, I'm often looking at these, these questions, and because I have questions too. What are you really going to do with the funds, and how are you really going to stretch it? Communicate with the donors and ask for more. I thought this was very clever, and I appreciate y'all adding this to the presentation, Trish, and Liz. So what you see here is Hurricane Florence. So this is a relevant relief update. And it says here, I want to help again. And so it gives that opportunity that, yes, you contributed and we used your funding and it's making a big difference. And here's the data that's actually going to show you that, the outcomes. We helped in 22 counties, and this is how we helped. And then, I want to help again. So thinking about that. And then you even see that there's personal note here. It's just a simple thank you. So thinking about all of that and how that can make a big difference. Oops, I skipped over. We'll go back one. So also those structured giving levels. Now I'm one of those that always looks at these and I'm like, oh gosh, are they a gold or platinum or, silver or just a bronze or a tin can? What are they? And it really does make a difference. I've seen this in some of the reuse programs around the country as we've gone to visit, where you display their names and you do have these categories of structured giving. It's a very low cost, high impact way to do that. And so paying attention to how you can do that. This right here is from Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. And it makes a big difference because also when I see these folks out in public, which I do because they're in our community, I thank them. I'm like, hey, you're, one of the top contributors, and I appreciate that to Friends of Disabled Adults and Children. And so, paying attention to that. And recognize the event, the contributors in events or annual reports, and then also finding that personal way to thank folks. It's good, to have that methodology and also think about how you're going to communicate all of this to them. Oops, there we go. Okay. All right. So you can also fundraise with special events, and there's all kinds of great ideas that some of you have already done and that are out there, and we've copied and put some of them in here. We also encourage folks to, think about, so we've got some strategic planning ideas around some of this when we're talking about sustainability. But, you could do a run and roll. You could do a run. You could do, there's been walks and roll, run, walk and roll, bike rides, all kinds of things. Concerts. It's amazing to me how much money you can raise from a concert with a local entertainer. We're talking significant amounts of money, significant being hundreds of thousands, which is pretty cool. Also, gathering with food for sale, clam chowder, barbecue, and having it combined, so that there are entry fees. Special events, entertainment, silent auction items. I'm amazed at how much those silent auctions bring in. Yeah. And then also thinking about hosting, simple, frequent gatherings. There's bingo tournaments. Now, you got to make sure that you can actually do bingo or gambling or what have you, so pay attention to that. And then we also see successful fishing tournaments and golf tournaments around the country that are focused on raising funds for reuse. And it's great when we can also add in the accessibility piece to that. So accessible fishing and then, with the tournament or what have you. Don't plan, and this is part of the strategic planning, don't plan an event that takes more time and effort than you're going to raise. We have seen folks do that where they didn't do the homework ahead of time and the work ahead of time to track your return on investment. Make sure that you do that. Watch the calendar. There are a couple of folks that didn't, and the weather's all over the place, but didn't plan well. Then their events have been, canceled because they maybe planned something during a time of year what wasn't a good idea. But also, we've seen folks that plan and then they're up against another huge event. So make sure that you're avoiding conflicts. Also plan with events with multiple ways for people that can participate and so that you can get that broader audience, and that's the game. That's what you want to do. The name of the game here is to get a lot of folks and get them really connected. Focus on a single event, and you really can get that stable. You can become known for it. FODAC has some of those. Project Men has some of those. We've seen this in other arenas, successful in Alaska, definitely in Alabama. Helen's done a great job of that, Kansas. So lots of examples of folks that have done this kind of methodology and continue to do that. And then also thinking about partner, and ways to use your volunteers. When I think about really creative partnerships, I absolutely think of the good work that is going on in Kentucky and how creative that y'all have gotten with your reuse program and emergencies. Very, very cool, and ways to think about some of that. This is a good example of, events for in-kind donations. Lose it or reuse it. It's a medical equipment swap. And this is an event that actually is in Nebraska. And it's that quick turnaround event. It's very clean, very clear. Here's what you do. Once again, some strategic planning tips. Don't plan an event that takes more time and effort than necessary. We have seen some of these donation events that go for days. We do not recommend that. We recommend hours, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at the most. Also, once again, watching your calendar, making sure that you're partnering and using volunteers. You could co-host some of these events, in an area where there's a blood drive. Kansas actually has done some really cool things with blood drives and reuse. Food pantry drives, recycling events. I know we did a huge event down here with Dell Computers, and it was covered by CNN, and it was pretty amazing, and we had thousands of people helping us. So thinking strategically and thinking about sustainability and how all that comes together.
So it's important to think about your communications and really your branding strategy. And I encourage you all to look at the AT3 webinar archives, because we did one not too long ago that was focused on your communications and your marketing strategy. So a lot of this ties into some of those tips and solutions and strategies that we included before. But it's important to think about your internal communications. You want to make sure that all of your internal communications are aligned with your operational goals. Clear, consistent messages foster buy-in from partners and potential donors. Increase advocacy and funding with consistent messages to external audiences. So again, you can see here that it's all about consistency, making sure that your message is clear. Demonstrate focus with stories that are mission oriented. So again, we talked earlier about sharing those success stories, letting people know where their donation dollars are going and who are the real people in their community that are benefiting from their acts of kindness. Teach staff how to use those stories, use it smart, be smart about it, be creative, and create those opportunities for funders and donors to share those stories as well too. You want to build trust by showing expertise and impact, and of course, outcomes data definitely relates back to all of that. And you want to support partnerships that demonstrate the value of collaboration over competition. That is so important. So all about partnerships and collaboration. Partnerships can build brands that people know, trust, and associate with meaningful work in the community. Often we see, AT programs, AT reuse programs across the country with really solid networks. And those are the folks that, are memorable. Their work is outreach to the state and all corners of the state because they have a solid, growing partnership with a network. So again, that is absolutely meaningful and absolutely can help to build that branding, if you will.
Yes, all great points. And that whole concept of branding. So another thing that we want to talk about when we're talking about sustainability is thinking about, once again, the stability plus incremental growth and that key staffing. Sometimes people do grow too quickly, as you know, and so really thinking about how do you do that strategically, purposefully, in a way that makes sense. I'm still surprised when I meet folks who have not built annual budgets, really on existing or stable sources of income. Instead they're just kind of building a budget and saying, good luck, right? Or what have you. Include those goals. And once again, that gets people hooked in when you start to tell people about that, to create new funding sources. And then create a position that's just dedicated to this, that is all about development. And I found that really does make a difference. And it's important to distinguish that from other duties that you don't want to add that necessarily to somebody's tasks, but really make it its own position. Really using partnerships to extend capacity. can make a huge difference. So whether it's figuring out who in the community can help us with repairs, who in the community can help us with storage, who can help us with transportation, and being very smart about that. And then increasing staffing through the effective use of trained volunteers. So you want to make sure that you have training for those, really thinking about how you do that. When we did the survey, we found that 69% of the respondents, they have a role for marketing. I'd like to know more about what that actually means, maybe take a deeper dive. But this person is traditionally focused on communications, promotion, that social media awareness, public awareness activities. Experience absolutely matters. And so sometimes you can find folks who are retired who want to get back into it, in some capacity. When it comes to a development officer, we found that only 38.5% of the respondents have a development role. This really is a role that's focused on sustainability. And so looking at the plan, being the relationship builder with major contributors, and being knowledgeable about how you can back up and step in for the CEO if needed. So really thinking about strategically how you do that. Engaging in mutual beneficial partners is very important. Whether it's the repairs, the distribution, accounting services, we've seen that some of you have actually gotten creative and had that in-kind support. So thinking, just what are the skills and services that you can offer to a partner? What is it you need jointly? What is that win-win-win, as Stephen Covey would tell us? And how can you do that? Is there something you could do when it comes to distribution together? There are a couple of groups that are working with Meals on Wheels or with the library system, and that's interesting when it comes to transportation. Also thinking about, do you want to operate a thrift store? Some folks have actually done that. When you're really thinking about, God, how do I optimize the use of these volunteers? Some tips here. Thinking about what a true volunteer is, making sure you're not crossing the line, and that you are staying within, federal guidelines and Federal Fair Labor Act to make sure that you're not, crossing any lines here. But you also, when you're talking about volunteers, you want to make sure that you're giving meaningful, activities, and that you're not assigning just, silly tasks. There are a lot of folks that are looking for ways that they can contribute, and they still have a lot to contribute. So office support, pickup delivery, device cleaning, public awareness, going out and doing customer follow-up and data collections. So thinking about all of that, and then also, strategy for figuring out how you leverage those volunteers. It's worth the time to sit down and identify the needs, have job descriptions. If you need some of those, let us know, and devise training. And there's lots of great ideas out there when it comes to training. The other piece that we want you to think about is translating those outputs into outcomes. And often we find that sometimes folks, they're focused sometimes just on the outputs, not so much the outcomes. A lot of programs do just track the outputs, numbers of people, numbers of devices, estimated savings, those types of things. Very cool, could be very sexy data. But the outcomes is really that follow-up, and it's figuring out what did happen. What would have happened? Level of satisfaction. If the person didn't get the device, what would have made a difference there? Did it help the person do something that is a major life function? Did they go back to school, work, be able to participate in the community? Avoid an undesirable, outcome of falling or being in the hospital or what have you. Some of these measures, a lot of our peers around the country have actually developed, and so there's a lot to think about with this. So return on investment, it could be the value of avoided healthcare cost. Virginia has spent a lot of time working on some of that, based really on, environmental savings. That there's other programs that have weighed in and put that into their formula, and several states, California, Kansas, Georgia have all done that. And then what's the economic value of being able to work and avoid the cost of lost work time for AT users and also for people who are giving care. So think about the outcome.
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear y'all. Not sure what happened there. There was some kind of weird noise and then it went away. So we're right here with you, and apologize for that. So thinking about, and I'm wondering, can y'all hear us okay? Okay, so we'll just keep moving. Great. So why using the outcomes data? Only 56% of our survey respondents said that they actually use that. We absolutely encourage people to do that. It's very important. And what it does is basically helps you be able to tell that, for every dollar you give us, $3.25 goes back, or whatever your formula is. Also tracks and adds credibility to what you're trying to make happen there. Strategies for using some of that outcomes data. You can use this as stories within newsletters and also within media. You can use it within reports. You can use it really to advocate for contracts for services and also to build new partnerships. That return on investment, also coupled with outcomes data, really can help make decisions whether you're being effective and what are the strategies that have the greatest return. So thinking about that. So when we're talking about what is the bottom line here when it comes to sustainability and your reuse program and being able to make sure that it's around for a long time and still thriving, going and growing, it's incremental improvements, building, in that sustainability, building really a capacity to serve. Also, minimizing expenses by emulating the successful strategies for others, and then also leveraging the resources through partnerships, really within, but also beyond that focus of service. Is it another county that you want to help? Is it another type of technology that you want to reuse? So thinking strategically about that, and then measuring those outcomes as a value, and it is a value for your sustainability tool. So we do hope this has been helpful. As we said, this is a conversation we can absolutely continue. And what are your questions and how can we help?
And while y'all are thinking of questions, there were a couple messages earlier on the Facebook chat. I just want to reiterate that Trish mentioned that when you are encouraging your supporters to designate and donate to your project, that they could do that on Amazon and through Amazon Smile. And then I also wanted to mention that Amy from AT3 mentioned that Facebook giving is another option. So earlier we were just talking about easy ways to make it so that your community can donate, and that way you can get those sustainable funds. And so Facebook is definitely another way to go about doing it. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to type them in the chat area. We'd be happy to answer your questions. And again, just know that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll have this archived on the AT3 website. So feel free to go back into the webinar, and you can definitely reach out to us if you have any questions moving forward.
I know I'm often going back and listening to the webinars. It's incredibly helpful. And our contact information is right here. And so do let us know what questions you have. And know that this is a conversation that can continue and will continue. Like Liz and Trish have said, send us those good examples too of ways that you've used marketing and development and even brought in key staff and volunteers. We're always wanting to get that information back out to other folks. Trish, anything you would like to add to the conversation? All right.
No, I think it was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Trish. Helen Baker from our Alabama, the STAR program. Helen has a great. You're so funny.
Is Helen helping me?
Helen, you're helping Carolyn. Helen said, American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. That's for Carolyn.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So, always good to hear from you too, Helen.
ASPCA. Now we know what it stands for.
Now we do know. Yep. That's great. Very good. And Sophia, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate your time and being on here today, Sophia.
Yes, we do hope this was helpful and what you need. And so thanks for the feedback. All right, very good. Well, thank you so much. We're going to hang out for a little bit, just a few more minutes, and just let us know what your thoughts are and how we can help. Y'all have a wonderful day, and also keep us in the loop. And Helen, thank you so much. We really do appreciate that feedback.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks, everyone.
All right, y'all take care.